Good afternoon and welcome to the Joy Show. There's just one you. That's my acronym for joy, and it speaks to who we are and what we bring to this beautiful planet. I'm so excited that you're here today, and I want to begin our time together with the land acknowledgement. We work, live, and play on the historical and traditional territory of many Indigenous nations, including the Anishinaabe and Wendat peoples, and more recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Haudenosaunee nations. And as we gather from many places on Turtle Island, we as settlers are grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of people who've taken care of this land for thousands of years, including the Métis, Inuit, and all other Indigenous people. Also acknowledging that as we continue to grow and expand on these lands, there is still unresolved and dangerous inequality and discrimination toward our BIPOC and 2S LGBTQI+ family. By making these acknowledgements, we strive to be allies and take an active part in reconciliation. We recognize our oneness, we realize our history, and we choose to create a new reality. We are one. Well, my guest today is Rev.Sharri Johnson, and she is the senior minister and lead faculty for One Heart Retreats. And she's been doing this Zoom thing forever and making it a masterpiece. So I'm so excited for us to have a wonderful conversation. Welcome, Rev.Sharri. Thank you for saying yes.
It's wonderful to be here.
I'm so glad you are. And hello, Rev M from Hamilton. Glad you're here. The Joy Show is really about honoring that unique nature that all of us are. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit about your story because you have a pretty darn good story.
Well, gosh, where do you want me to start?
Well,
Before I was a minister, I taught college for 35 years and was also a freelance editor that same period of time. And
wow.
For about 10 years, from 85 to 95, people kept saying to me, you ought to be a minister. And I kept saying, don't be silly. Why would God want me to be a minister? On my birthday in 1996, my minister, I was the president of the board of the little Unity church. My minister walks into my office at college and he hands me a box of truffles and a letter of resignation. So I call an emergency now, and he's only the second minister this church has ever had. Okay, the founding ministers had been there for 20 years, and the day I arrived, they announced that they were leaving in 2 weeks.
Wow, that's a big change for any church.
So I somehow became part of the committee that hired the new minister. It took us 14 months to find him, and he was wonderful, and we became close friends, and I just loved him to pieces. But it wasn't where he was supposed to be, and he had found where he was supposed to be. So I called an emergency board meeting, and I'm sitting at a big long table, and my board is 7 people plus me, and I'm at the end, and he's here, and the secretary's here, and then they're all lined up, and they're all just absolutely petrified. I said, okay, breathe. I said, I've done a lot of praying about this, and I know that we can do this ourselves without hiring an interim minister and without taking 14 months to do it. Yeah. And their shoulders dropped. So I said, there's just one thing I said, there are enough people sitting at this table who do public speaking that we don't need an interim minister. We can take turns, and it'll be fine. And they went, I said, there is one thing we're going to have to do, though. We have to have somebody to handle the administrative business of the church, while we're in the process. Well, my secretary, and I knew she was going to say this, my secretary said, well, I can do that. She had an entire career managing office buildings, country clubs, health clubs. She had all that stuff. So I said, well, the only thing is you can't be on the board and do that. It's a conflict of interest. And she said, well, could I run again after we get a new minister? And I said, you certainly could. She said, fine, I quit. So we voted and elected her. And I said to her, okay, now that the hard part's taken care of, what do you need from us? And she said, well, did I mention his last day was Palm Sunday? She said, well, the first thing I need is someone to do the Easter Sunday services. And I said, I think I'd like to do that.
Who's talking through me?
And it turns out the only person in the room who was surprised was me.
Oh, that's fun. I love it.
I did 3 Sunday services. The first one was at sunrise, and it was Easter from the perspective of Mary, because I personally,
Mm,
Mary knew what was going on from day one. I mean, she always understood what was happening.
yeah.
And then I did 9:30 and 11 o'clock services were Easter, the Easter story according to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You know, guys who cribbed off each other's and the metaphysician. And then after the third service, we had a what I used to call an orphans luncheon. I started them as soon as I got there because I lived 1,000 miles away from my nearest relatives.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so Easter, Christmas, Thanksgiving, 4th of July, Mother's Day, Father's Day, and any other time we felt like it, the church would provide an entree and everybody would bring salads and desserts and we would have a fellowship after service. So we
Nice.
were doing that for Easter. And one of the most metaphysical people I've ever done in my life, she's about this big around and came right to hear on me on my bare feet. And I was wearing 3-inch heels, so she came to hear on me. Walks up to me and she says, Sherry, when are you going to get off the stick and go to the village, meaning go to ministerial school?
Yep. Yep.
And I said, Liz, when God calls me so loudly, I can't possibly mistake the message. Thinking I had shut her down, right? She says, did it ever occur to you God could be using my voice? Talk about I started taking classes the next day.
Nice. I love that.
I didn't graduate until 2017 because I got all the way into ministerial school at Unity and realized it wasn't where I was supposed to be. And when you start over again in Science of Mind, they don't count any of your Unity stuff.
They do now, fortunately, but they didn't back then.
They didn't then. So I had to start all over again and become a practitioner and do all the other stuff. And so it was a long road to get here. But the first date I had with my husband, who had a 40-year career in hotel management, we spent our date talking about the retreat center that I had been called to build, because I sat down as soon as I said yes. I sat down to meditate and I said, okay, God, here's the thing. You chased me for 10 years till I finally said yes. And I mean the yes, but I'd like to know what I'm saying yes to, because I don't see me as a pulpit minister. And mind you, I have never heard the term focus ministry at this point.
Yeah.
I get this 3D smell of vision, taste of vision, touch of vision of a retreat center in the mountains.
Nice.
I see the plumbing. I knew what this place was. So my husband and I spend our first date talking about it, and it's a perfect match. I'm the God person, and he's the business person, and everything is wonderful. Whole time I'm in ministerial school with CSL, he's finding us a retreat center to buy. And so I graduated in June of 2017, and on the 14th of October, we moved into a retreat center in Marshall, Arkansas, just outside of Marshall, Arkansas, which I described as 2 hours from everything Arkansas, and that was absolutely the truth. That was the 14th of October. On the 18th of February, he was diagnosed with acute small cell lung cancer that had metastasized his brain, his spine, his liver, and his adrenal. They gave him 6 months, and on the 18th of March, he passed away. And all of a sudden, I went from being the God person to being the person.
Yeah.
I knew for nothing about business. And so I had to learn, how to balance the books, and I had to learn how to order stuff, and I had to learn. The only thing I could remember that he had said, don't laugh. The only thing I could remember that he had said is there are 2 things we must have in the retreat center, and it's good toilet paper and good mattresses. So we had really good toilet paper and really good mattresses, but everything else I had to kind of feel my way around.
Well, and that's a big project, like to have, you said it was 12 acres, like that's
12.5 acres, and there were 3 buildings. There was a great big building that was the retreat house itself, and then there was a smaller building that was the admin building, and then there was a little tiny cabin that I lived in with my 3 dogs and a cat.
Well, and it's interesting, when we get called to ministry, it's different for everybody, but that call can be so loud and insistent. And then, we enter the world of effect and go, now how do I marry these 2 together? So now you have sold that and you are now doing more of a virtual Tell us about that.
My ministry now is almost exclusively virtual. I do some retreats with, like 2 or 3 people, or I go to them and lead a retreat for them. But most of what I do is teaching and writing and speaking by Zoom, just right here in my office, which is really nice. I still have to put on makeup, but I don't have to drive anywhere. So when I
That's
guest
nice.
speaker on Sunday, that's 2 hours I don't spend driving. So nice.
It's interesting, there's been, so much negativity around COVID, but really what it did, I mean, you and I have been on Zoom forever, but there are a lot of people who, when COVID hit, I know for me, I was ministering 2 churches at the time, and the transition was super easy
Well,
because I was already there.
right before COVID hit, I was not yet ordained.
Hmm.
My mentor and I met every month by Zoom, and he said to me, Sherry, there's something I need to ask you. And I said, what's that? He said, I know how important spiritual community is to you. And he said, I'm really wondering how you're handling that where you are when you don't have any community at all, much less spiritual. And I said, oh, well, I got that taken care of. I went and made a list of all of the CSL centers that live stream their services, and I bookmarked them all. And every Saturday, my husband and I would figure out where we were going to church tomorrow, see what time zone it's in, what time we need to be over to the office where the big computer screen is, and we would go to church. And he said, let me warn you, if your mentor ever says this, run. He said, well, I think there might be a few other people who could use that information. And now I have a 30-page addition to my website, which I also developed and maintain, called the Spirit Online Directory. The front page, the landing page, has 57 centers that live stream their services. They're organized by time zone, within time zone, my time slot, within time slot alphabetically. And it has the name, the time, and the live link. So you can go. And when COVID hit, now this happened in November before COVID, okay? So when COVID hit, I started getting emails from people saying, oh, thank you. We were stuck in Switzerland and we got to go to church in our own center because of your directory. And now that's just the first page. There's a page with meditations that are available online. There's a page with practitioners who offer services online. There are pages for short-term classes and long-term classes that are offered online. There's a page for gatherings because during COVID, having a coffee clutch thing once a week was something many centers did just so people could connect because they couldn't get together.
Absolutely.
And there's a page for downloadable apps. There are hundreds of online apps that you can download for meditation, for prayer, for all kinds of spiritual practice. And more than half of them don't have any fee. So I made a page with little videos that I made for video uplifts. I'm on the Global Heart of Peace. And so every Thursday I do a live meditation, and every Wednesday I publish a written one that's on my website and on Facebook and all that stuff too. So all of that came out of I think it came out of COVID. It just came early because I have a really good mentor.
Well, that's the thing. I think that was one of the things, a minister I was working with years ago at a UFBL church. I kept trying to get him to live stream his Sunday talks, but also his classes. And I couldn't get him to do his classes. And I'm like, come on, all we got to do is set the camera up and you can ignore it. Just because there are people, like what I'm finding in my center now and in my classes, I've got students right across Canada, in the Caribbean. I've got people who are connecting with me from all over the world. I've got lots of Americans who are taking classes and stuff with me. It's like, why aren't we doing this? All of a sudden I could literally go to church for a number of hours on a Sunday.
On Sunday, there are 6 different centers that live stream to New Thought Media. You can stay home in your pajamas with your coffee cup and do God stuff all day long.
Exactly. Because different time zones, they're going to hit you at a different time, and you could do it all day.
I did a workshop in Boston a couple of weeks ago, and half of the people at the workshop were in the Caribbean, in Barbados.
Yeah.
So
It
it's wonderful. And the thing about the Spirit Online directory is that it's my gift to a world that works for everything. Nobody pays anything to be listed in that directory.
oh,
All you have
that
to
is
do is send. There's even a page for focused ministers, and all
nice.
you do is send me the information you want to have displayed, and I will put it on the right page and make sure if it's a short term thing, it'll come down when the event is over. If it's a long term thing, it'll stay up until you tell me to take it down. And there's
Wow.
no fee associated with it because this is my gift to a world that works for everybody.
Well, I love that. I love that idea of, finding ways of collaborating. It's one of the things that has been really strong for me in Ontario here is that I'm the only CSL here. So I collaborate with Unity churches because I'm ordained in both
Mhm.
CSL and Unity. And so I collaborate with a bunch of Unity churches and we do events together. We advertise each other's classes and ongoings, and it really has it's expanded everything we do, which is fantastic. We're reaching more people and the message is basically the same.
It is. Somebody asked me once when I was at the Unity Church in Omaha, Nebraska, what's the difference between CSL and Unity? Because they knew I was in ministerial school for CSL, but here I was serving on the board and doing this. I
Yeah.
said, the sign outside. That was in this particular case, that was literally true. The only difference between what was taught there and what was taught in the CSL center was the sign outside.
Yeah, I'm really glad that there is now the ability to go from one to the other, like as a CSL minister, because I've been with CSL for 25 years. When I was hired to pastor a Unity church, I had to become ordained in Unity. And I was able to do that by taking a couple of classes, and I was ordained within, I don't know, less than 2 years
Yeah.
doing these classes. And it was just minimal, just learning some Myrtle and Charles Fillmore stuff to round out my education. But
I hadn't thought about it, but I might investigate because I was in Unity for 29 years before I found Science and Mind.
yeah.
But I was a member, you know. And another organization that I just absolutely love is Anton, the affiliated
Mhm.
network. They have been
Yes.
so supportive of me and my ministry and of ministers in general. The
Yeah.
first thing I heard anybody say at an Anton event, just I was instantly hooked. She said it was Michelle Whittington, and she said, people ask me, what's Anton? What's it about? And she said, what's your job? And she said, our job is to say yes. Our job is to say yes.
Say yes. Yeah. Well,
So
that
I am neck deep in Anton now because I'm so thrilled to find my peeps, you know. Because that's what my job is too. My job is to help people find their yes. Because I firmly believe that the universe has a one-word vocabulary, and that word is yes, all
yes.
caps, exclamation points. We just have to learn what the questions are.
Well, and I think I was reading something that Bruce Lipton had written in the foreword of Michael Beckwith's book on visioning. And he writes in there that, consciously we're using about 5% of our consciousness, and that the subjective is what's kind of running the life, which means we're not actually living our lives, we're living somebody else's. And it's whoever gave us information from 0 to 6, those first 6 years. That's where we're living from. And so there's a lot of forgetting that needs to be done and some changes. And when we start saying yes to life, it changes the game. It really does.
That's one of the things I love about New Thought is if you got a room full of New Thought people, it wouldn't matter what flavor they were, just a room full of New Thought people.
Yeah.
You would discover that they were in a certain position spiritually. I believe that children are born knowing everything they could possibly ever need to know because
Yeah.
they are not yet aware of any separation between their mind and divine mind.
Yes.
And in the process of growing up, they get a whole lot of crap piled on the outside of that. And sometime in their late 20s, early 30s, they realize that's what's been done to them. And they spend the rest of their lives peeling it off again, trying to get back to the perfection that was always there in the first place.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, remembering that we're created perfect, whole, and complete is such a great thing. And sometimes it's hard for people to hear initially. And then some confusion comes in when we start talking about healing, because I really believe this is a powerful healing teaching. And
Oh,
you'll talk about healing, and then, people go, oh, so now I'm to blame because I have this, or I'm to blame because I have that. And it's like, no, 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 that's not it.
no,
That's not it.
not it. And I think part of the key to that, at least for me, is recognizing the difference between healing and curing.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
so when somebody says that, then that's when I introduce that concept of you're talking about curing and I'm talking about healing, and those are two different things.
Very different things. Very different things.
And most of the time, that will make them at least willing to put their toe in the water.
Yeah, I had a great experience of that when I was in my training at CSL. I was training as a practitioner, and I had a young man, 32 years old, come to me with end stage lung cancer. And he came, and so, in my mind, I'm preparing myself. Okay, we're gonna make this cancer go away, and he's gonna walk out of here perfect, whole, and complete. And he comes to me and he said, I said, so what would you like me to treat about? And he goes, I just want it to be okay. I went, okay, well, let me treat my mind first to get into the right frame. But it was a powerful lesson.
Oh,
His healing was death, and he wanted the people around him to survive that, because he knew they were going to be hurting. And so his wish was for it to be okay, that they would come to terms. And he found CSL Calgary, um, so that his wife would have a community once he was gone. Like, it was just, it was so fascinating, but it was such a great lesson.
oh
And
yeah.
healing is not about, making conditions perfect. It's about wrapping my mind into the divine and knowing that all is well. And then whatever happens, happens with such an organic way that life is beautiful. It doesn't matter what's going on out here, right? We live in this glorious realm of possibility. And what I think about it is what it is for me. And I mean, that comes right out of the Bible, right? In the beginning, where he tells Adam, whatever you name a thing, that's what it'll be for you.
And one of the things that I just really love about New Thought in general is the openness of it, recognizing that oneness with a capital O,
Mhm.
that's what we're after. That's
Yeah,
that's the truth where we live, and our job as spiritual seekers is to take away anything that gets in between us and that experience.
that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And it's when I taught college, I taught computer science for 35 years. And and I knew that there was absolutely nothing in the world that well, except for when those little people say, I love you, grandma. That one's pretty good too. But there was nothing in the world that was better than seeing the light go on over somebody's head and knowing I had pulled the string. Let
Exactly.
me tell you what, when you change the subject from computer science to spiritual truth, whiz bang, is that a big string? I mean, it's just, it's amazing. There is nothing more powerful. There is nothing more fulfilling. There is nothing that's a bigger, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, give me another order of that.
Well, that's it exactly. It's, being called to do this work and then stepping into it is one of the most remarkable things. Like, I founded this center that I'm in right now. It's only a little over a year old. And so we're still finding our footing and all of that. But I am so joyful. I am so happy to be here, so happy to serve. And when Reverend Barbara View called me to say, so would you consider starting another CSL in Toronto? I was like, huh, hmm, sure, why not? God places the call, you say yes, right? So that's what happened. And so here we are a year and a quarter later, and the center's, finding its rhythm and groove. And it's all good stuff. And one day at a time, we, welcome whatever's coming and just be joyful, be grateful, You know, there's a roof over our head. We have internet. Hallelujah. There's so much we can do.
Yeah.
We're going to take a little commercial break here at Rev.Sharri, and then we'll be back. So, everyone, you're watching The Joy Show here on the New Thought Media Network. Be sure to donate, keep this place going. ntmedia.org is the place you want to be. So, we'll be right back in just a couple of minutes. Do not go away.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors and donors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Spiritual Center Kitchener, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, and all of our individual donors and sponsors. Thank you for being a part of the New Thought Media Network. Please come be you.
And we're back. This is the Joy Show here on the New Thought Media Network, and my guest is Reverend Sharri. And we're just having a really good conversation about the call that we get, and the answer is yes. Doesn't matter how it comes, the answer's got to be yes, right? So what's the biggest thing on your plate right now? What is the thing that delights and excites you the most in your work?
Well, and it's something I did not anticipate, and that is that I have built a metaphysical research library here.
Awesome.
My goal, of course, someday is for it to be in its own building, but for now, it's here in my home, and it has 1,000 books in it so far, but it also has lots of space on the shelves, and more books arrive all the time. My goal right now, the catalog is online, but the books are not.
Okay.
My eventual goal, and I am also in a PhD program with Emerson, and almost down to the thesis project. And the thesis project is figuring out what to do with this library so that I can have it be globally available 24/7, 365.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I'm part of the how is just money, because most of the books that are in there have e-versions, and all I would have to do is buy e-version of each book and find a way to hook them into the catalog, and we're good to go. There are some things that are not that easy. For instance, I have a large collection of Science of Mind magazines going back into the 1980s. I have Creative Thought going back very far. I have Unity magazines and Mindful magazines that go way, way back. And getting those digitized might be something of a challenge. And I also have my prized possession, my library's prized possession. One of the young men who built the shelves and the flooring works for a company that does rehab of houses. And they were gutting an old house, and they found a Bible that had been printed in 1867, I think. And it's like this tall. Big, great big Bible. Yeah. And they were going to throw it away, and he said, "Oh, no, you're not." No, I know where that goes. I know where that belongs. And he brought it to me.
Nice.
I had to tape the cover for now with clear tape, but the body of it, the pages are all pristine. I mean, they're
Nice.
yellow. They're 200 years old, but they're none of them are torn. They're not crumpled. I mean, it's just gorgeous. Even the dedication page at the front, where the parents bought this Bible and presented it to their children for a Christmas present.
Wow.
So I don't think that's ever going to get digitized.
No, probably not.
It's impossible. It's just not the highest priority.
Well, and the thing is that there are so many Bibles available online that it's not really necessary. But let's talk about the Bible a little bit, because when I was trained at CSL, I was trained by Reverend Carol Carnes in Calgary, and we didn't talk about the Bible at all. We didn't learn anything about it. We didn't study it. We did do a course on world religions that covered all religion. And of course, Christianity was part of that. But we didn't really do that. And I have since been educated through the Universal Foundation for Better Living and Unity, and come to quite love a bunch of stuff about the Bible when looked at from a metaphysical perspective. It is a powerful library that really speaks about the evolution of humanity, like the journey that we all walk.
I always, because I started out in Unity, always had a lot of Bible background, and in my ministerial training at CSL, metaphysical Bible interpretation was one of the required courses, and one of my absolute favorites, because of a Unity minister I haven't seen in a lot of years, who first taught me Bible metaphysical interpretation. And he said, okay, here's what you do. First, you read the story.
Yeah.
Just read the story.
Just
and
read
then
it.
Tell the story the same way it was told in the Bible. And then you go back and you find the pieces. Every noun and every verb is a symbol.
Yeah.
And you figure out what they mean. And then you tell the story again with the symbols in it. And then you tell the story just as the symbols.
Exactly.
That's the one that is still current today. I have a talk I do about metaphysical interpretation, and I talk about how it works in the Bible. My favorite story to do in the Bible is the story of the sower, because it's so rich, and it's there. It's just they throw them at you in a basket, of the symbols. And because I lived in Nebraska, and there's a statue on the top of the state capitol in Lincoln, of the sower with his basket.
Yeah.
That's my favorite. But I would do that. But then I did one with a fairy tale. Jack and the Beanstalk. I can't remember for sure, but I think it's Jack. And then I said, okay, now we just pick an event that happens in your life, and we can treat it like a story. We can find the symbols that, take all the nouns and write it down, take all the nouns and verbs, think what those things represent in your life. Why is that verb there? What does that verb mean to you? Why is that noun there? What does that noun mean to you? And the next thing you know, you've metaphysically interpreted yourself out of a mess and into an understanding.
Yeah, that's what's interesting. I got most of my Bible education from Reverend Evan Reed, who was with the Universal Foundation for Better Living. And one of the things he said to me right in the beginning was, read it, sit with it, and feel it. What does it mean to you? I can tell you what it means to me, but what does it mean to you? And it was wonderful to get to that place of going, well, let me just open up the Bible and see what's there. And then I would read something, and my favorite book is the book of Job. And I love that, because it's really every person's journey, right? We go from our self-righteousness until we awaken. But when I looked at the Bible from that perspective, and then, studied a bunch of courses with him on, the geography and the history and all of the stuff, and how these stories came to be, and the people of the time, and it's just rich. It's so good. And I got all of a sudden this great understanding. So I had about 5 or 6 Bibles here. I now have 0. And the reason is that I am on the board of directors for an organization that deals with people living with HIV/AIDS, and we get a lot of refugees that we support. And there were 5 people I came across who were new to the country who needed Bibles. And I went, I have Bibles. And I gave them all away because I can go to BibleGateway.com and get whichever version I want online. So I did that. Now I'll probably go and buy another one. But it really felt good to take these gifts of mine and, as a gift of love, give it to these people who were new to our country, who really were seeking more connection and to reconnect with their spiritual background. So I think the Bible for me is just a really exciting thing. I have not, in my new center here, I have not taught metaphysical Bible yet, but I will be, because it is just so rich. I love it.
I lucked out when I was in Asheville, North Carolina. By the way, the second most beautiful place I've ever been in my entire life. Ireland
Oh,
beats
really, eh?
much on a really, really, really good day. We had a workshop with Rocco Errico. And it just happened to be my place in the rotation to host. So I got to have lunch with him.
Nice.
And talk about, and I mean, one of my most treasured possessions for, well, since midway through the last century, I love saying that, was My Lamb's a Bible. And Rocco Errico has an article in Science Mind magazine every month where he gives the historical, what this meant when it was written. What did it mean? This is what it meant when it was written. And I love how that ties, because it invariably hooks it from 2,000 years ago to right now, this minute.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so I love that added aspect of it, the history of the Bible. The Bible is not just spiritual stories. It's metaphysics, it's philosophy, it's sociology, it's anthropology, and it's history. I mean, all of that is part of the soup. And I just love being in a situation where you can talk about all those pieces together and then go home and say, gee, that was cool.
Yeah.
What can I do with
that? Well, that's it. It's kind of fun to be able to do that. And I think being in a setting where we can have those kind of conversations is really wonderful. Yeah. And one of the things I've noticed, every now and again, I'll come across metaphysicians who might criticize another religion. And I thought, I can't really do that, because however I find God needs to be how I find God. And my way is mine. I don't have to force it on anybody else. And so when I think about all of the work that I do a lot of social justice type things. And I think for me, it's just really important that love be the glue that is a oneness that we are all seeking in this New Thought movement. And so oneness means that I accept you as you are, where you are, with whatever consciousness you have. I will choose to love you. We may not hang out on a daily basis. We may not agree about a lot of things, and that's okay. We can agree to disagree. That's perfectly fine. That's how I got to be married for 21 years. My husband and I, we don't always agree on everything, of course, but we love each other. We agree on that. And so there's a journey of going, oh, you see it this way. Oh, I see it this way. All right.
Well, now there's 2 things I have to tell you about that.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is my prism proof.
Mm-hmm.
My undergraduate degree is in math with a minor in physics, because the University of Missouri, Kansas City didn't have a degree in computer science until the September after the August that I graduated with the degree in math. And I don't use that minor in physics very often, but this is the one place where I do. If you take a prism and you shine white light through it, what comes out the other side is every possible wavelength of light. Now, and that's because of diffraction. But the reason I use this is that the most popular metaphor for God across the globe, the most popular metaphor for God is white light.
Yes.
So I look at it like this. If you take that white light and you shine it through the prism, you are going to, and what the prison proof is proof of is that there's no one right tradition.
Exactly. Yeah.
Comes out the other side, you have all those colors, including the ones that you cannot see.
Yes.
They're all there, whether you can see them or not. And if were to remove one tiny, tiny, tiny wavelength, just one, remove one, not only would all of the others disappear, but so would the white light.
Yes.
So I look at this as the perfect metaphor for spiritual searching.
Yeah.
One of those colors represents a path that is necessary, not okay, necessary for at least one being. When the last human being for that path is for whom that path is right is gone, then that path is just going to kind of dissolve into the ones on either side of it. Until someday, 5 or 6 million years from now, it'll be white light going in and white light coming out. Not because we only have one tradition, but because we have all come to understand oneness.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. One of the analogies that I use is, a fabulous tapestry, that has a really gorgeous picture. If one thread were missing, just one,
it's gone.
It's like the whole thing has been destroyed at that point. And, having people come to understand that who you are is valuable, but not only valuable, essential to the unfolding of the universe today. I don't care what mistakes you've made or are currently making. Every single bit.
That's all there is to it. If you're here, you're necessary.
If you're here, you're necessary. Yes.
I
love that.
My first CSL minister taught me that when he said, and he threw this out like it was a throwaway line, and yet I quote it at least once a week. His name was Chris Michaels, and he finally retired the second time.
Chris Michaels.
The first time it didn't take, but the second time it took. And I haven't seen him in 15 years, but I love him to pieces. And he said, I believe that the human race, the planet Earth, would be a much happier place if we could just keep one truth in the front of our mind. Just one. And here's the truth. Every living being, not just every person, every living being is in every moment doing the very best they can do with the wisdom they possess in that moment. Might not be good enough for you, might not be good enough for me, but it's the very best they can do, and it is therefore by definition good enough.
And, holding to that, I love Chris Michaels. Fabulous, fabulous minister. What's interesting to me about that is I'll catch myself every now and again when I see an injustice. And then it takes me a minute to get out of the accusatory human experience of they did what, to go, okay, let me breathe this in and let me see how this awakens something in me to allow me to do better in everything I do coming up. So there's that journey of, the divine and the human, right? It's like, so I don't watch the news because...
Thank you very much. When I found myself sitting in the living room screaming at Peter Jennings, impact is now, I do it time for me to stop watching the news.
Yeah, I don't watch it. I ask my students, please shut it off. And trust me on this, everybody will tell you what's going on in the world.
I figure if it's important enough for me to know, somebody's going to call me up and tell me.
Somebody's going to tell me. I'm going to hear it when I'm walking down the street and somebody's got their car radio too loud, or I'm going to walk into a store and a couple people are going to be talking. It's going to come to me if I need to know it. But I want my mind to be as clean as possible. And I'm on Fireside Chat tonight with Pastor Michael Mangus, and we got talking about, because he covers the news first, and then we got into the other stuff. And I catch myself when I'm doing that going, man. And I taught a program in elementary school that goes totally against the anti-bullying stuff, because I don't think anti-anything is a good idea. So it was going in and teaching compassion, kindness, and respect. And that whatever you put out online, because I was dealing with online a lot, is like whatever you put out online is there forever. You cannot take it back. And what I had the kids do was they had to take a tube of toothpaste, and they had a race, right? Who can spread it out on this tape as quickly as possible. So once somebody had won that, then I said, okay, now this part two, you got to put it back in the tube. Well, you should have seen them trying. It was hilarious. They made a terrible mess, but they were doing their best to get it in there, stick it. And finally I went, okay, just stop.
That's
You
wonderful.
can't,
Yeah.
it can't be done. And what I'm showing you here is when you put something online, you say something mean about somebody, or you send pictures of yourself, or whatever you do, just know it's forever. And if you've said or done something that's caused harm to someone else, and whether you've done it knowingly or unknowingly, if you've not done anything to acknowledge your part, just know that that also lives on forever. And so, it was interesting to watch these kids and just to see I mean, they had so much fun. And my husband and I taught it. We had a blast. But, getting this message across that, it's like anti-racism and stuff. I want to deal with belonging. I want to see all of us learning how to belong together rather than, fighting these systems. Let's find a new way. Let's not do that. Let's find a new way where we can love and respect one another as we are.
I agree. I agree. I spent a lot of time. I've lived in 37 states,
Oh my goodness.
and I had lived in 34 of them before I graduated from high school.
Oh my.
So I've lived in a lot of places with a
Yes.
lot of different kinds of people.
Yeah.
I drive linguists crazy because every place I've ever lived is in my accent someplace. But
Yeah.
but what I learned from that is that, well, Ernest Holmes said the greatest drawing and healing property in the universe is love.
Absolutely.
And my decision making factor at One Heart Retreat Center when it was in Arkansas, and at One Heart Retreats now, my decision making factor as a minister and as a person is, what would love do now?
What would love do now? Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
the only question you need to ask, and it will always give you the right answer,
Yes.
and it will diffuse anything.
Yes, it will.
People listen
Mhm.
because it's a shock factor. You say to someone who's red in the face and screaming with their fists doubled up, what would love do now? And they go,
Yeah.
they just, it's like a bucket of cold water. And that's
Thank them for sharing.
what we need to teach. What would love do now?
What would love do now? One of my favorite things when people get really upset about stuff is to just look at them and say, wow, tell me more about that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Tell me more. And what's interesting is it changes because there's no resistance to what they're saying, right? Because whatever you resist persists, right? So it's that way of going, if I'm choosing love in every moment, what does that look like? And for me, I remember being in Calgary, and I was walking along a mall with my son, and there was a homeless woman who was pushing around a buggy full of things, and so I went up and I was chatting with her a bit, and she sort of looked at me like, why are you being nice to me? And I said, but by the grace of God, I could be you. This could be me. I know that it doesn't take much to flip the switch where something could happen where all of a sudden you don't have. So for me to disrespect her, but she talked about how people would spit on her and yell at her and go get a job and I mean, she's not doing anything. She's just walking down the street, and some people can be quite mean. And that part for me is a real disconnect. Like I know that my life is my life, and I've had, great privilege in many ways. I've had difficulties in others. And for me to disrespect another human being is the most hateful thing that I could do. And so I'd rather be curious Tell me more about you. Talk to me about you. Who are you? Right? Like that's I sometimes sit down on the street and chat with homeless people and just have a conversation. Like, tell me about you. Tell me about your life. What are you up to? How are you dealing with the cold or the heat or the whatever's going on, right? It's just people are people. They want to be seen. And that's what love would do.
That's what love would do. Love would see them.
Yeah, yeah. And is it always easy? No, because some days my best is down here. Other days it's up here.
Been there, done that. Gotcha. Yep. Right there with you.
Exactly, exactly.
There last week, for instance, two things happened that I celebrated. One was Pope Francis rescinded the doctrine of discovery. 600 years ago, Pope Urban II to split the world between the Portuguese and the Spanish and said, here, have at it. You can do anything you want. These people don't count as people. And Pope Francis said, no, that's wrong. We're rescinding it. We're going to undo it. And I was so excited I could hardly stand myself.
Wow, that is awesome news.
And the other one was, they decided to indict Trump. And I thought, well, it's so hard sometimes to not be judgmental.
Yeah,
and for me, the key is to separate the person from the action.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's the only thing I can do. How much pain must that person have been in to be willing to do that?
Absolutely. Yes, yes. I think when I look at someone that is a complete narcissist, which I would say Trump is, for me, when I see that, it's like, wow, you must be so insecure. There must be so much pain in you in order to treat people the way that you do and to behave the way that you do. It's quite remarkable. Like I remember when he was elected, and it took me a minute to get my humanness out of the way of.
It took me 3 days.
Oh my gosh, it was tough. It was really tough. And then I sat back and I went, so what is the gift of this? And the gift is that it brought the shit to the surface.
Boy, I'll say.
Like in a really big, loud way. And I talked about, I said, it's a little bit like spring cleaning. When you spring clean, you make a hell of a mess. You're taking things out, you're shifting things, you're making absolute disaster of things. And that's exactly what he was. And I think that was one of the greatest blessings to the evolution of our consciousness is that, we're not hiding so much anymore. We've got Black Lives Matter and we've got the Me Too movement and we've got all these things happening that are coming to the surface where we're going, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And I think we as metaphysicians are starting to, really come to the top where maybe we're going to see a world that is far more honoring of humanity, animal, plant life, all of it, that we begin to see that we're part of one thing.
I woke up this morning at 2:00 thinking about this particular question.
Yeah.
And I realized that I felt some kind of a healing happening. And what it was that I am no longer afraid that we can't fix it.
Of course. Yeah.
I've been struggling for so long, with learning to history of stuff that I was lied to about as a child.
Yeah.
And by my entire country, and they're still trying to lie to me about it, and I'm not as gullible as I was 70 years ago. And so it has been for the last 6 weeks. I've been really, really struggling, and that's not fun.
No.
And I woke up this morning at 2:00 in the morning with a smile on my face in the pitch dark. And I swear to you, my first thought was, thank you, God, for this healing.
Yes.
I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I know it's going to be okay. I know we are going to fix it. I know there is something I can do personally that will make a difference in my life and in my world. And that when that thing arises, I will be in a place where I can do it.
Yes.
And it was just like, that old saying, it felt like the weight of the world was lifted off my shoulders.
Yes.
That was exactly what it felt like.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those, that kind of spiritual epiphany moment, that click,
Yeah.
that all of a sudden everything just lines up and you go, whoa. And there's like a new experience that is coming out of you that you don't even understand why.
It's
Um,
like the firemen unload the hose off the truck and
mhm.
it's all crinkled up, and then one of them goes like this, and it goes, and the whole thing smooths out.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great analogy. I love that. I love that. Well, Reverend Sherry, we're down to our last 4 minutes.
Wow.
What would I know? It goes so fast. It goes so fast. I have to move it to a 2-hour show, I think. Just kidding, Robert. But so, what I would like you to, leave people with a little nugget, or make it a big one. It's okay. What would you like people to walk away with today?
What I would like people to walk away with is, what would love do now? Is it that's it's only what would love do now? Five words.
Yeah,
But it's the answer to every question
it
you could
is.
ever have,
Mhm.
including when you're looking in the mirror.
Oh, especially when you're looking in the mirror. Yes, yes, I love that. I have a tattoo on my wrist that says love is the answer.
Cool.
Yeah, it's for me, it's like I want, and I've got it so that, when I'm walking, people can read it. Not so much I can read it properly, they can. Because for me, that is the answer. That, and when I recently read a book called The Wisdom Jesus, which is fabulous, by the way, written by um, Episcopalian priest Cynthia Bourgeot. It is a fabulous book about Jesus as a wisdom teacher, and it just puts him in a completely different perspective than what we got from traditional Christianity. It really deepened my relationship with the work of Jesus. But really, what was his work? Love everyone. You might yell at the money changers in the temple, but that doesn't change the love. So, as much as we, maybe have people in the world that we go, I can't hang out with you. Like, I don't agree with this or that. But the truth is, we can still love. We may not like a behavior, but we need to love the person. And you mentioned that with the idea of Trump separating the behavior from the being, because at the essence of all of us, there is this divinity.
Yes. God, that's the thing I fall back on when it gets as hard as it can get, is that every single person, everything that exists is God, because God made everything out of its own self. There wasn't anything else for God to work with. So we are all made out of God.
We're all it.
Every single one.
We're all it. This has been wonderful, Sherry. I'm so glad you said yes. I've really enjoyed our time together, and I look forward to being on your show come November. That'll be. I've got some time to think about what we're going to talk about, but I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you for the consciousness that you hold, for the love that you're bringing to our world. And I'm so glad that you're part of the Peace Initiative, because, peace begins one person at a time by living in that truth moment by moment. Thank you for being here. Thank you to everyone who's watching. We'll be back next week on the New Thought Media Network. I'm Barbara Schreiner Trudell, and this is The Joy Show on ntmedia.org. And please like, share, subscribe, do it all. See you again next time.